Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I got an email from Kevin H. Subject line, earthquake fault under the Salt Lake Temple? Yes. And then in the email, hi, Jared. I'm still watching your video about the Salt Lake Temple today and wondered if you knew this. There's a fault line that goes directly underneath the Salt Lake Temple and Conference Center. Apparently, it is part of the Wasatch Fault, which has several segments. I would recommend reading this Wikipedia article as it may have some concerning information for your viewers in your area. Thank you for the email. Just to clarify, I'm not in that area. I'm in Missouri, but I am from the Salt Lake Valley originally. I grew up hearing about and being warned about the big one that would happen someday. And I did not know this. And thanks to this email, it led me to something else that I didn't know that makes the situation even worse. So we're going to go ahead and dive into this. Before we do, just really quick, a few days ago, I did a live stream because I received this in the mail. Somebody had attended my friend Troy's funeral. He was the host of the Last Dispensation YouTube channel. He passed away in January. And I had a few more memories that I wanted to share. And, since I got this in the mail, I thought it was fitting just to do a quick live stream. I shared what Troy sent me in his the last text that he sent me. It was a video, which during the live stream, I realized it was actually, there was probably more meaning behind it than what I realized. So I'll put the link for the live stream in the description box below in case you haven't seen it. But when I did the live stream, I checked the GoFundMe and it's still up and they haven't quite met the goal. They're at 90%. So please consider donating if you can, especially if you were a fan of Troy's. If you haven't been able to yet, it made me think really, really quick of this scripture, James chapter 1:27. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So, if you can, please donate to Troy's family that he left behind. I'm doing this because I would definitely want him to do this for me if I had been the one to have passed away first. So please donate and at the very least say a prayer for his family. Okay, so we're going to go to a couple websites to take a look at this. The first one is the USGS website. And there it is right there, this yellow line. You see one over here that goes through the Family History Center. But if you come over here to Temple Square, it goes right down the middle, basically. Not perfectly, but it basically cuts the temple in half as viewed from above. It nearly goes over like the center point, which would be about right here or so. That's stunning to me. I didn't know about this. Again, I grew up in Salt Lake, specifically in Murray. That's my hometown. And I always heard about the big one and that there was a big fault line along the Wasatch Front. And if we zoom out, you can see that. I'm assuming that what most people have been referring to is like this right here. Because I seem to remember when I was like in Young Men's, we were going to like one time do an activity where we would go to where the fault line was, because I don't know if it's like marked somewhere or if there's like a trail or something. I can't remember what it was, but one of my Young Men's leaders was going to take us to go see something having to do with the fault line. And I think it was like along here, on like the east side of the valley. But you can see there's a bunch of other orange lines. And this one right here, it looks like these two lines that we were looking at before, they connect up here north of downtown. But when you zoom in and look at the one on the east, right through the Salt Lake Temple. And then if you follow it up across the street, across North Temple, it goes underneath the conference center too. So, I mean, just think about that. It doesn't go through the Salt Lake Tabernacle. It doesn't go through the Assembly Hall. This map still shows the North Visitor Center. That's not there anymore. It doesn't go under, the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, the church office building, the administration building. No, it goes through or directly under the Salt Lake Temple. So this is a new thing to me. I had no idea. For some reason, they don't depict it here. This is, let's see, let me go to home. Geologic Hazards Portal by the Utah Geological Survey. I don't know why they don't show it on theirs. So right here is the Salt Lake Temple. They have these buildings kind of like, they kind of look 3D as you move the map around. So hopefully you can see that, the Salt Lake Temple, but you don't have an orange line. But you have the other line that goes through the Family History Library and Church History Museum. You scroll out. Now, I don't know why there's a discrepancy between the two. Maybe the USGS is more detailed with their map. I don't know. It looks like you kind of have the beginning of it right here, maybe, if you go up north just a little bit. But you zoom out, and it shows you like the danger zones for Utah. It's pretty self-explanatory. You probably don't want to be in the red area when there's an earthquake around there. So, and the thing about it is, okay, so you have Salt Lake City and the metro area. And I think technically, according to like the US Census, it encompasses like the Salt Lake Valley mostly, like the metro area of Salt Lake. But and then technically, I think the Provo area is another metro area, and then Ogden is a third metro area, according to the census. But in my mind, being from Salt Lake, I've always thought as the entire thing from Ogden all the way down to, a little bit past Provo, basically Utah Valley, Salt Lake Valley, and then going on up to Ogden as like one big metro area. It's interesting because, you have this similarity between Salt Lake City and Jerusalem, where if I was to turn the map upside down, Salt Lake City is basically, it's like relatively in the same position that Jerusalem is when compared to the Great Salt Lake and the Dead Sea. I've done videos about that before. Many people have noted that similarity. You have a river Jordan that connects these two salt lakes or dead seas to another fresh lake. In the case of Israel, you have the Sea of Galilee. In Utah, you have Utah Lake, and they're connected with the River Jordan or the Jordan River. In another similarity between Salt Lake and Jerusalem is that, you have Israel, which is like an up and down type country. It's not wide, it's not circular, it's up and down. And so you have something kind of similar happening here along the Wasatch Front, but earthquakes. So it's kind of stunning, and it makes you think, especially with the renovations of the Salt Lake Temple. In fact, why don't we go to that really quick? Let's remind ourselves of what President Nelson said. This is the October 2021 General Conference, the Temple and Your Spiritual Foundation. I'm recording this on the 6th. Earlier today, I posted what I think is an interesting video about how I think that the beginning of the renovation of the Salt Lake Temple maybe began a period of trials for the church to prepare us for the second coming, to help us live a higher, holier way, to get rid of the old debris, what President Nelson also referred to as our favorite sins. I think sometimes we have to go through really difficult trials, maybe to get to a point where we're willing to acknowledge that we have a problem or there's things that we need to take care of. Um, and so there was like one big year of trials for the whole world in 2020 when the renovations project began. And I was comparing the architecture of the Salt Lake Temple to a type of timeline. How if you start on this side, you have like a big spike, like one of these towers, or like the towers on one side would represent 2020. And then you have the years in between. And now in like 2025, 2026, perhaps another big spike in trials. And I just noted that there's been a lot of focus lately on trials in general conference and social media posts and the 2026 BYU Women's Conference. And then just seeing it in my own life, me and my family, but also my friends and family, it feels like something's going on. So like it kind of feels like there's these 2 big years of trials, and it's meant to prepare us. It's meant to strengthen us. It's meant to repair us, to prepare us essentially for the millennium. That's what President Nelson said here is, he was talking about repairing and fixing up the Salt Lake Temple, a foundation that will withstand the forces of nature into the millennium. And I think he's comparing the Salt Lake Temple to us. I know that he is. He says it right here. These are the latter days. If you and I are to withstand the forthcoming perils and pressures, it is imperative that we each have a firm spiritual foundation. So I think that something's going on, but toward the end of this talk, he says, "My dear brothers and sisters, when renovations on the Salt Lake Temple are completed, and for you and me in our personal lives, after we go through these trials that seem to be going on right now from 2020 until now, and with the Salt Lake Temple about to be rededicated next year." So think of it like in that sense. My dear brothers and sisters, when renovations on the Salt Lake Temple and you are completed, there will be no safer place during an earthquake in the Salt Lake Valley than inside that temple. Likewise, whenever any kind of upheaval occurs in your life, the safest place to be spiritually is living inside your temple covenants. So it's an interesting thing going on. I think there's a parallel between the Salt Lake Temple and us and the Lord preparing us for possibly hard times ahead, and or the second coming itself. Okay, now I did a video a while ago. Let's see, when was this? May 22nd of last year. Came across a post on X by Mario Nafal. Salt Lake City is on a quake time bomb, and he referenced a SciTech Daily article, which we're going to go to. And the name of the article is "The Next Earthquake is Long Overdue. New research reveals Wasatch Fault more dangerous than previously believed." I'm not going to go over this again. I'm just going to show you the highlights. This has to do with a new discovery or like new observations that relate to the dip angle of the sliding surface. How I guess like the angle matters when it comes to these fault lines, which makes sense. They noted what happened in 2020 with the Magna earthquake. So if you're not familiar with Salt Lake, let's go back here. So, here's downtown Salt Lake City right here. And if you go over here to the west part of the valley, here's Magna. I don't know exactly where the epicenter was, but it was like somewhere over here. There was an earthquake over here that was strong enough to make the Angel Moroni of the Salt Lake Temple drop his trumpet. So with that earthquake that happened at the same time as the pandemic was starting to really spread across the United States, they discovered with that earthquake that it was at a shallow depth, and it made them rethink the, I guess, geological situation of the Salt Lake Valley and how it's like, oh my gosh, look what happened with the magna earthquake. It may not quite be what we thought with these slip angles. And then it says, communities along the fault are more vulnerable to earthquake damage than previously thought. Okay. Well, I'm glad I don't live in Salt Lake anymore. I pray for all of you. Hopefully you have emergency supplies. I mean, we all should, but please really take this seriously, especially since the church has renovated the Salt Lake Temple for such an event. And at the very least, we know that there is going to be a great earthquake that affects the entire world when Christ comes and he sets foot on the Mount of Olives. It may be worse in Salt Lake because of the fault lines. I don't know how that's going to go. But if you live along the Wasatch Front, you should probably be a little bit more alert when it comes to earthquakes and prepared. But then I came across this as I was preparing for this video. I didn't know this. So this article that we just read, again, that was from last year, May 2025. I came across this, which was from 4 years before that. So this is Fox 13. New geological study shows fault lines meeting under Salt Lake City. Now, I don't know if it's like the same fault lines as what we were looking at, like the fault line that goes directly underneath the Salt Lake Temple. But it says 2 active fault lines appear to connect under downtown Salt Lake City, according to a newly published geological study. Scientists believe they have the potential to cause more damage than previously thought. Utah is believed to have a 50% risk of a large, damaging earthquake along the Wasatch Front in 50 years. So these are 2 situations, the slip angle and then the 2 fault lines meeting under Salt Lake City, that make the situation more dangerous than previously thought. Let's go back to this map. I just want to see really quick if we can see what fault lines they're talking about that meet under Salt Lake. Are they talking about, I mean, there's this that meets up here and meets down here. That's kind of the east side of the city. These 2 meet up here north of downtown. I don't know which other ones meet, or if it's even depicted on this. I don't know. But when they say that they meet under Salt Lake City, I think that they actually mean the city limits of Salt Lake City rather than the whole Salt Lake Valley. So that kind of puts, church headquarters more in the danger zone, if that's the case. Okay. Well, I decided to add the words earthquake and earthquakes to my spreadsheet called Timeline Phrases. This is the tally of General Conference talks by year that include these words and phrases. So, for example, the word earthquakes showed up in 1 General Conference talk in 2025. We have searched many, many different words and phrases, and this has been a very enlightening spreadsheet and exercise. Well, let's take a look and see if we can find any patterns. And right off the bat, you see some of these darker colors for earthquake and earthquakes in 2020, in 2021, and you could even say 2022, but definitely in 2020. Let me give you a sampling of one talk that brought one of these words up. This is Elder L. Whitney Clayton of the Presidency of the 70, April 2020 General Conference. So just a month after that earthquake affected the Salt Lake Temple. He said the church has commenced a 4-year restoration project to improve the temple's structural and seismic strength. And then there's a footnote. Let's take a look at that. An earthquake on March 18th, 2020 amply demonstrated the need to undertake the project. Again, if we liken this to ourselves, if we think about that earthquake being a message from the Lord, not just for the temple and how the temple needs to be renovated, but for us, like this earthquake being a message to us that we need to guard ourselves, upgrade ourselves, renovate ourselves, get rid of the old debris, then yeah, we should pay attention. And then continuing, the foundations, floors, and walls will be fortified. The best engineering knowledge available today will bring the temple up to modern standards. We will not be able to see the structural changes, but their effects will be real and important. It's just more parallels with us. If you were to fix some of the things in your life, there's probably a lot of people that wouldn't know about it because we all put on a mask. Only the Lord knows your heart. Only the Lord knows what you do in secret. So I like this. We will not be able to see the structural changes, but their effects will be real and important. In all of this work, the temple's beautiful interior design features will be preserved. Okay, so let's go back to this. We see another spike right here in 2010 and 2011. That makes sense for two reasons. One is in 2010, there was, oh my gosh, I can't remember. It was at least an 8.0 earthquake. It was an 8.0 or something in the 8.0 range earthquake in Haiti that killed over 200,000 people. As far as natural disasters go, that is a lot. Like when you get to the hundreds of thousands, that's like just completely catastrophic. And then in 2011, there was an earthquake and tsunami that hit Japan. It was probably the most cinematic natural disaster that I've ever witnessed. It looked like something straight out of the movies. So you had two very notable earthquakes in those 2 years. And as I was skimming through the talks, they both seem to reference those events. Like the two events that seem to be referenced were those two events. Okay, and then if we go back in time, you don't see a whole lot here in the 2000s, 90s, 80s. There is a spike in 1971, in 1976. And then before that, there's not a whole lot. What's interesting about this, and I bring this up a lot whenever we look at this spreadsheet, if I were to send this back in time, like if I was to give this to somebody back in 1942, in that case, I'd have to like print it out and give it to them so they have a physical copy. And they could effectively look into the future in a way to see what is being talked about in General Conference. Imagine that you're someone from 1942. You might ask yourself when looking at these columns for earthquakes, what happened in 1971? Why is there a sudden spike? What about 1976? And pretty much this whole decade, because relatively speaking, the 70s kind of saw an uptick in talking about earthquakes, which doesn't surprise me because if you've been watching the channel for a while, whenever we look at these other words and phrases, and the more second coming related they are, the more you see this, you'll see a big spike, usually in like the 60s and 70s. And then it dies down and then it'll pick back up during President Nelson's presidency. It's like, it's been a pretty consistent theme there was something going on primarily in the 70s, it seems, that really spurred a lot of Second Coming talk in General Conference. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it's because in 1967 you had the 6-Day War in which Israel captured Jerusalem. I don't know if it has to do with like the Independence Visitor Center being constructed, the purchase of Adam-on-Diamond, the construction of the BYU Jerusalem Center a little later on. That was all happening around this time. The church was very active with purchasing church sites. And I want to get into it, but I think this was also around the time that they started purchasing more of the area, the different parts of Nauvoo. Because you know that for a long time in Nauvoo, there was a temple lot. There was no temple until it was reconstructed during President Hinckley's presidency. So I don't know if there's I don't know, but there was a spike around that time. I decided to ask Gemini because Grok wasn't working. It was overloaded. What happened in 1971, in 1976? Were there really notable earthquakes? And yes, there was. In 1971, there was the San Fernando Silmar earthquake, 65 deaths and over 500 million in damage. And then there were a couple notable earthquakes elsewhere, one in Turkey, 1,000 fatalities. And then you had 2 8.0 or above earthquakes called Solomon Islands Doublet in July of that year. In 1976, and I had no idea about this, it says 1976 is considered one of the deadliest years of seismic activity in recorded history. So there was an earthquake in the Tangshan earthquake in China that killed about 242,000 people. So I didn't know up until now if there were any other earthquakes as bad as what we saw with, for example, the Indonesian earthquake in 2004. It was an earthquake and a tsunami that killed over 200,000. And the 2010 Haitian earthquake that killed over 200,000. Well, here's another one. It was in China, and it was in 1976. And then there were a few other really bad earthquakes. Let's see, the Guatemala earthquake, over 23,000 people and 76,000 injured. The Philippines, 8,000 deaths. And it was the deadliest earthquake in Philippine history. And then in Italy, there was one, 1,000 deaths and 150,000 people homeless. So I didn't know this, but yeah, 1976 was a bad year for earthquakes. Worse than 1971. So if we go back to this, it makes sense. It makes sense. And so you fast forward, and then, like I said, you see this spike in 2010, 2011. That makes sense because of Haiti and Japan. But then the biggest spike that we see, at least for the word earthquakes, plural, is in 2020. And as far as I know, that earthquake in Utah, it didn't kill anybody. I don't know if there were other notable earthquakes, but from what I saw in the conference talks, they were mostly talking about this earthquake and also the renovation of the Salt Lake Temple. So it's just interesting. These are signs of the times. It's being noted in General Conference. Even if it's not on the nose, it should be clear enough when you're listening to them that they're pointing out that these are signs of the times. Okay, let's move on. I've updated my spreadsheet called Signs Earthquakes. This graph right here shows you the total deaths by year from earthquakes. Some of the data is probably incomplete. This only goes back to 1985 because I get this data from Wikipedia. I'm not going to do a big in-depth study. This is just the data that's readily available, and it's accurate enough for our purposes. But here you go. You have these two big spikes. Again, in 2004 from the Indonesian earthquake and tsunami. And then in 2010, the Haitian earthquake. And then there's a few other sizable spikes. Let me zoom in. So we have all the numbers from 2025. And I'd say that there was a bit of an uptick. I have all these years on here ranked in column E, and 2025 came in at 16th place. So there was a total death toll across all the earthquakes of about 8,200. So if you put 2023 aside, you have to go all the way back to 2015 to see a deadlier year than 2025. If you go to the right over here, I noticed a couple things. Number one, there had been a pretty long pause in earthquakes in this range, 8.0 to 8.9. The last time that we had seen any was back in 2021, and there were 3 in that year. But then we went 3 years without earthquakes in that range. And then last year, I made a video talking about this fact. I was like, I don't know when we're going to have our next 8.0 or above, but it's probably going to be soon, because when you go back in time and you just see how frequently they happen, the average, it's usually like once a year or once every other year. And so us having gone for 3 years without any 8.0s or above, it's probably going to happen sooner than later. And then it did that same day. The same day that I published that video, there was an 8.0 earthquake, and it's this one right here. So that was interesting and kind of notable. I'd say it was overdue. But then look at column N for the 4.0 to 4.9 range. And 2025, out of these years that I have, going back to 2012, it's in the number 1 spot with 16,000. Now, if we go to the Wikipedia article for 2025 earthquakes, they have this table, goes from 2025 back to 2015. And so for that range, 2025 had the most 4.0 to 4.9. And then the most overall, if you add up all the different magnitudes, 18,000 compared to these other years right here. So it didn't necessarily see more like large earthquakes, but if you take all the earthquakes together, there was an increase in 2025. So I think that that's interesting. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I want to talk about the Las Vegas, Nevada temple. This is a picture I took back in probably 2008 or something like that with my SLR camera. I love this temple. I love the temple grounds. I love the inside of the temple. I love Vegas, and I love Phoenix, and I love the just the desert Southwest. I miss it so much. A couple other pictures I took. You may or may not know, but there's a kind of a miraculous story about the Las Vegas, Nevada temple that has to do with an earthquake. We're going to look at this 2014 Deseret News article, A Light on the Hill, Las Vegas, Nevada temple reaches 25-year milestone. This is by Trent Toon. And I heard this story the first time I went to the Las Vegas, Nevada temple. It was a friend of mine. Her dad drove me to the temple. I was visiting and I wanted to go to the temple. He drove me there and he told me this story. But today I'm adding it to my spreadsheets. I have a spreadsheet called Signs Church Specific. So I have it right here. So 1989, this was October 17th of that year. And then I put it on quotes A through Z. I made a new row for Las Vegas, Nevada temple. Here is the story. Another interesting fact about the Las Vegas, Nevada temple was recorded in a book by Chad Hawkins, Holy Places, True Stories of Faith and Miracles from Latter-day Temples. In the book, Hawkins recounts how the window that was to be hung in the celestial room. Okay, so this is the main thing. The window that was to be hung in the celestial room of the Las Vegas, Nevada temple was in a glass factory in Santa Cruz, California in October 1989, when a 7.1 magnitude earthquake hit the San Francisco Bay Area and caused nearly $3 billion in damage. The quake's epicenter was near Santa Cruz County. Hawkins wrote that the window had taken 6 weeks to make and was scheduled to be polished and shipped in time for the open house, which was 2 weeks away. Quote, "When the tremor hit, the window swung wildly, but amazingly escaped any damage. Other glass projects in the factory were shattered, ruined beyond repair. The window arrived intact 1 week before the temple opened for public viewing." This is a good note to end on because this is how we want it to be for us for the second coming. We don't want to be among the other glass projects that are ruined beyond repair when Christ comes. Or, at the final judgment, especially at the final judgment. We want to be the one that remains intact. I think the Lord, he uses earthquakes and many other things to teach us lessons, to give us warnings, to help our minds think about things a certain way. So I don't think these stories and these miracles are just coincidence or pointless or just interesting trivia. I think it's something that we should really consider. But especially with the Salt Lake Temple, which we just learned today on this channel anyway, that we have this fault line that goes right underneath the temple. Very, very interesting. All right. Well, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.